Hello, I'm Chris Barrow with the BBC News. The Ukrainian government has condemned a Russian missile strike on a dam near the central city of Kryvyi Rih, describing it as an act of revenge for Ukraine's counter-offensive in the northeast. President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's from Kryvyi Rih, had this message for Moscow.
Your missile attacks today, your Russian missiles on Kryvyi Rih, on the dam of the reservoir, on objects that have no military value at all, in fact on hundreds of thousands of ordinary civilians, is yet another reason why Russia will lose. It will lose not only this war, but history itself. History is written by humans, but never by non-humans.
Officials say the attack has affected water supplies and created a risk of serious flooding. Thousands of mourners are solemnly filing past the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II, with the nighttime queue stretching for almost 4 kilometres through central London. Managing the sheer volume of people represents a logistical challenge, as Rob Watson explains from outside Westminster Hall.
The authorities are saying the queue could go as long as 16 kilometres. I mean, it's just quite a thought. And there could be as many as 1 million people who want to come to visit London and to pay their respects to the Queen over the next 4 or 5 days, which is an extraordinary number and would put extraordinary pressure on the transportation system, everything about London. But in reaction to that, the authorities say they have something like 1,000 volunteers on hand, and if one could forgive us going into that level of detail, there are 500 Portaloos.
A report into the handling of the pandemic has criticised world leaders for massive global failures in trying to contain COVID-19. The Lancet Commission says governments failed to adopt best practices to control the spread of the virus and criticises the World Health Organization for being too cautious and too slow. Prosecutors in the US say they're re-examining the conviction of a Baltimore teenager in a high-profile murder case, which gave rise to one of the world's most popular true crime podcasts, Serial. Prosecutors are now calling for Adnan Syed to be freed pending a retrial. David Willis reports.
Adnan Syed was 17 years old when his ex-girlfriend Hae Min Lee was found strangled 23 years ago. Despite emphatically denying any involvement in her death, every appeal he has filed has been denied, and Mr. Syed has now spent more than 2 decades in a Baltimore jail, where he may have been destined to remain were it not for the 2014 release of a true crime podcast called Serial, which, as well as focusing worldwide attention on his case, also cast doubt on his guilt.
World News from the BBC. The trial has begun in Argentina of a former police officer accused of the abduction, torture and murder of a young left-wing activist during the country's brutal military regime. In his first court appearance, Mario Sandoval denied being involved in the disappearance of the student, Hernan Abriata, in 1976. He was extradited from France 3 years ago. The powerful US Senate Foreign Relations Committee has approved legislation that would strengthen military support for Taiwan. Receiving bipartisan support, the bill seeks to boost security assistance by $4.5 billion over 4 years. It also provides for sanctions if Beijing attacks what it regards as its renegade province. Scientists say that a new breakthrough will allow them to monitor Arctic sea ice all year round, bringing benefits for future weather forecasts and shipping. In the past, researchers have struggled to measure the thickness of the ice in summer. Our science correspondent Jonathan Amos explains.
Sensing the area of the Arctic Ocean covered by ice has been relatively easy from space. Satellites essentially just look down. But observing thickness is a lot more complex. It's done by radar satellites that measure the difference between the height of the ice and the surface height of the ocean. If you know that difference, you can then calculate the submerged part of the ice. But this hasn't worked in summer, when meltwater collects on top of the ice. The radar signals are dazzled. Now, the Arctic University of Norway has solved this problem, using a deep learning computer algorithm that's able to pull out reliable measurements even in those confusing summer months.
The American R&B singer R. Kelly has been found guilty of 6 counts of producing child pornography and enticing underage girls for sex. Kelly, who's already serving a 30-year sentence for sex trafficking and racketeering, was cleared of 7 other charges, including obstruction of justice. BBC News.